All right, so you guys really wanted to know more about Cyril Ramaphosa, especially with all the recent stuff in the news. And I get it. The guy's life story is pretty wild. I mean, it's like a political thriller or
You're
something.
not kidding. And what we're looking at here with these sources, it's not just one event, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
It's like a window into a whole person, a political party, a whole nation even.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So we've got his Wikipedia page. We got some articles on that whole Fala robbery thing,
Yeah.
and why it wasn't prosecuted. We even got some stuff on the political maneuvering around this national unity government in South Africa.
Right. And what's interesting, what jumps out at you when you start digging into this is that this business success that Ramaphosa had,
Right.
everyone thought it was a strength, but now
Yeah.
a lot of South Africans are looking at it like, maybe not. I mean, can a capitalist really fight for a nation that's struggling with this level of inequality?
It's a really good question. It's
Yeah.
a big question. Okay, so let me just ask you this. Like Ramaphosa, right? He goes from leading these anti-apartheid protests, like literally protesting in the streets, to owning over 100 McDonald's franchises.
145 McDonald's.
Then back into politics, and he's president. I mean, what?
Talk about range.
Okay, so before we get into all the current craziness and the drama,
Yeah.
let's back up for a sec. Give us the backstory here. Like, how does Ramaphosa go from activist to business tycoon? Pulling from the Wikipedia article here.
Well, his story starts right in the middle of, the anti-apartheid struggle. I mean, the thick of it. He was a lawyer. He was fighting for equal rights. Then he becomes this powerful union leader,
Wow.
forms the National Union of Mine Workers,
Okay.
NUM. They led these massive strikes that just put so much pressure on the apartheid government.
So I'm guessing that's how he got this reputation of being such a skilled negotiator.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he was crucial in those final years of apartheid, working from the inside to dismantle the whole system. But then, this is where it gets interesting.
Yeah.
He pivots. He goes into the business world and not just, dabbles in it.
Right.
He becomes massively successful. We're talking chairing MPN,
A mobile phone company, right?
huge mobile phone
Yeah.
company,
Yeah.
owning those McDonald's franchises,
Yeah.
builds this massive investment company.
What was it called again? I read that.
Shanduka.
Shanduka, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's almost like he lived two different lives.
Yeah.
But then you read about, things like his involvement in the Americana massacre, and the Wikipedia article talks about it.
Yeah.
And it gets a lot more complicated, doesn't it? I mean, it's this really dark chapter that kind of puts a dent in that whole, hero of the people image, right?
Yeah. No, you can't avoid it.
Yeah.
It's there. And for those who maybe don't know the whole story, the Americana massacre, it's this horrible event where police killed all these striking miners at this Lonmin platinum mine back in 2012. Truly, truly horrific.
Yeah.
And, Ramaphosa at the time, he was a director at Lonmin.
Okay, hold on. Let me make sure I'm getting this straight. So the guy who was once fighting for miners' rights is now on the company's side during this brutal crackdown.
Yeah, I mean, it's that tension that has followed him ever since. And the Wikipedia article actually quotes him. He called for concomitant action against these striking miners.
Wow.
Even called them criminals.
Wow.
Now, the inquiry, the official inquiry, they said that his communication with the police didn't directly lead to the massacre, but this perception that he sided with the company against the workers, that's hard to shake.
Yeah. Okay, so how does a guy with this complicated past even become president? I mean, he ran on an anti-corruption platform back in 2018. Promised reform, a new era for South Africa. Right. Like, did any of that actually happen?
Well, there was definitely a wave of optimism. People were hoping he would use that business savvy, that business experience to fix the economy, tackle corruption.
Right.
But as the Wikipedia article points out, he kind of inherited this country with some deep-rooted problems,
Sure.
economic woes, the calls for land reform, this persistent inequality. And then on top of that, you have the 2021 unrest.
Right.
Which was, the worst violence since the end of apartheid.
Yeah.
So it's been a tough road.
Yeah. And then just when you think it couldn't get more complicated,
Right.
you got this Fala thing blowing up in the news. So you've got this robbery at his farm back in 2020, millions of dollars in cash stolen, accusations of a cover-up. Then you've got this Arthur Fraser, the former head of state security, filing a criminal complaint.
Right.
But in the end, no prosecution. What happened there?
Well, the Daily Maverick article does a pretty good job explaining how the National Prosecuting Authority, or NPA, Think of them as like the South African FBI.
Right, okay.
They decided not to prosecute.
Interesting.
It said there wasn't enough evidence.
Yeah.
But the article also highlights all these, these unanswered questions.
Right.
Like, where did the money come from in the first place?
Yeah, good question.
Why was it in cash on a farm?
Yeah.
Did Ramaphosa even, did he report it to the authorities like he was supposed to?
Yeah.
I mean, these are big questions. And the fact that we don't have clear answers.
Yeah.
That's what's fueling all this speculation and mistrust.
Right. So even though he wasn't charged, this whole thing has definitely made people wonder about, his transparency.
Right. Exactly. And it just feeds into this bigger question about power and influence in South Africa.
Right.
Did justice really prevail here?
Yeah.
Or were there other forces at play?
Okay, but before we go deeper into Fala, we need to talk about the current political landscape, right?
Yeah.
So Ramaphosa's ANC party, they lost their parliamentary majority for the first time, like ever. Yet he still got reelected as president. How does that even work?
Yeah, it's unprecedented. He was able to stay in power because of this coalition.
Okay.
With opposition parties, including the DA,
right,
which has, traditionally been the ANC's biggest rival. This points to a huge shift in South African politics.
Wow. So even though the ANC lost their grip on power, Ramaphosa was able to hold on to the presidency through this coalition.
That's right.
It sounds like South Africa is at a real turning point.
Definitely a turning point. And then you throw in this whole debate over forming a national unity government.
Right. Right, the GNU.
The GNU, it just adds another layer of complexity to all of this.
Yeah, no kidding. We've got articles arguing both sides of this whole GNU thing.
Oh, yeah.
So in part 2, we need to unpack those GNU arguments, and then we have to circle back to Fala and those unanswered questions. I have a feeling things are about to get a lot more interesting.
Okay, so we've got this whole concept of like a national unity government, this GNU, right? Yeah. Being tossed around in South Africa. It's been tried before, but things feel different now.
Oh yeah, they're definitely different. I mean, this isn't the Mandela era anymore. South Africa's political landscape is way more fragmented these days, and the stakes feel a lot higher,
Yeah, for sure. And from these articles, it seems like people either really love the idea of the GNU or they absolutely hate it. There's no in between. So let's understand, like, what's fueling this whole debate? What are the main arguments for and against it?
Well, the people who support a GNU, they say it's like absolutely crucial for stability,
Yeah. Think about it. You've got these major economic challenges. You've got social unrest. And then this lingering sense of uncertainty. So they say, a GNU could bring together all these different parties, encourage cooperation, and hopefully tackle those issues more effectively.
Okay.
There are even some pretty influential business leaders quoted in these articles.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
They're pushing hard for this, saying it's the only way to prevent, like, total economic disaster.
So the idea is that if everyone's working together, it'll just be easier to get things done.
Right.
Exactly. Makes sense. But I'm guessing there are some pretty strong counter-arguments too, right?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. The critics of the GNU, they're saying that it could actually make things worse, undermine accountability even. They're worried about, backroom deals and compromises being made that would silence the voices of, everyday South Africans. And several civil society groups were quoted in these articles. And they're particularly concerned about this. They're saying that a GNU could lead to this, consolidation of power among the elite, which would just further marginalize the people who are already struggling.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's kind of like a trade-off.
Right.
On one hand, you have the potential for stability and cooperation, but on the other hand, you risk silencing dissent and like strengthening these existing power structures.
Exactly. It's a tough call.
Yeah. It's a really, really tough call. And this is where understanding Ramaphosa's own journey becomes even more important, I think. Like he's gone from fighting for workers' rights to becoming this wealthy businessman to now like navigating these really complex political waters as president.
It's a fascinating arc.
So, I mean, some people would say that his, deal-making skills, all that stuff that he honed in the business world,
right,
that's exactly what South Africa needs right now. But then other people might look at, his wealth and his connection to that Marikana massacre and wonder if he can really represent the average person.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a totally valid concern. And these articles, they don't really give us easy answers. They offer this glimpse into a nation that's really wrestling with its past, its present, and its future.
It feels like every time we think we have a handle on things, another layer of complexity just pops up.
It's true.
But I gotta say, I'm more intrigued now than I was at the beginning of this whole thing.
See? That's the beauty of exploration, right?
Yeah.
And it's where we see the limitations of just looking at things on the surface level.
Yeah.
We have to understand the context, the motivations, the ripple effects that flow from individual actions.
Okay.
And, in the case of South Africa and Ramaphosa, those ripples, they go way beyond, the borders of the nation.
So you're saying that this isn't just a South African story. It has, like, global implications.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. South Africa is kind of like a microcosm of the challenges that a lot of countries around the world are facing right now. You've got economic inequality, political polarization, legacies of colonialism and exploitation. These are issues that resonate everywhere.
So for our listener, why should they care about this whole saga unfolding halfway across the world?
Because it forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and the fight for justice. It challenges our assumptions and encourages us to engage with the complexities of a world that's constantly changing.
You know what? You're right. This whole deep dive into Ramaphosa's life and the state of South African politics, it's really making me think about the bigger picture. It's not just about one man or one country. It's about these forces that are shaping our world,
Oh, exactly.
and the choices that we make in the face of those forces.
And that brings us right back to the Fala Fala affair. I mean, it's not just a scandal. It's a symptom of these deeper issues that need to be addressed.
Okay, so in part 3, we need to unpack those unanswered questions surrounding Fala Fala, and then we have to explore what this whole saga might reveal about the state of South African politics today. I have a feeling this is going to get really interesting. Okay, so we spent a lot of time talking about it, but let's really unpack this Fala Fala thing. What do we actually know? And more importantly, I think, what don't we know? We got this robbery, right? Happens at Ramaphosa's farm back in 2020. Millions of dollars, cash just gone. I mean, come on. It sounds like something straight out of a movie.
Right. It's the kind of story that just grabs you. But the thing is, the actual theft, it's almost secondary to the questions that it brings up. Like, you remember how in part 1 we talked about that Daily Maverick article?
Yeah.
And how they did a good job of, kind of laying out all the reasons why the National Prosecuting Authority, the NPA, decided not to prosecute.
Well, that's because FBI.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They said there wasn't enough evidence, but there's still so much we just don't know.
Okay, yeah, walk us through those unanswered questions, because it feels like every time I read an article about this thing, there's just another layer of, like, mystery added to it.
Right. It's a real head scratcher. Like, for starters, where did all that money come from? Like, what was the source of it?
Yeah.
Why was it in cash on a farm?
Right.
And did Ramaphosa even do what he was supposed to do? Like, did he report it to the authorities properly?
Yeah.
Like, these are big questions. And the fact that we don't have, like, solid answers, it just leads to more speculation, more mistrust.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder about, like, how transparent things really are.
Right.
And how accountable, South Africa's institutions and people in power really are.
What's interesting is that article, it also mentioned that Ramaphosa might have actually broken the law, because he didn't report the robbery to the police.
Right.
Right away, at least. Instead, he handled it, like, internally, is what they said, with his own security team. I mean, I'm trying to see it from both sides, On one hand, I kind of get it. Like, getting robbed it's scary. It's a traumatic experience. And maybe he just wanted to deal with it privately at first. But on the other hand, I mean, the guy's the president. Shouldn't he be held to a higher standard, especially when you're talking about, millions and millions of dollars?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's really the core of the issue here. It becomes a question of his judgment. Like, were his actions appropriate for someone in his position?
Yeah.
And I think this whole case has become, like, this focal point in this bigger debate about whether Ramaphosa really does represent, like, real change.
Yeah.
Like a break from the corruption of the past.
Right.
Or if he's just another player in this system that's designed to protect the elite.
Okay, so taking all of this into account, like, where do you land on Ramaphosa? I mean, is he a hero? Is he a villain? Or is he, somewhere in between?
Man, that is the $1 million question, isn't it?
It is.
And there's really no easy answer. For me, what's most interesting about all of this is that Ramaphosa's his journey, right?
Yeah.
From activist to businessman to president.
Right.
It kind of mirrors South Africa's own, kind of wild ride over the years,
Yeah.
embodies those challenges, those contradictions of a nation that's still dealing with, all this baggage from apartheid,
Yeah.
while also trying to, build a more just future, a more equitable future. So it's really complex.
That's what I love about these deep dives is like you're not just getting the headlines. You're actually getting, the context, different viewpoints, and a deeper understanding of why this stuff even matters.
Yeah, totally. And the follow thing, regardless of what the, like what the real truth is, it just highlights how fragile trust is. Trust in your leaders, trust in your institutions. It's really easy to break that trust.
And maybe that's the takeaway for our listeners.
Right.
As they continue to follow this story, because it's not over.
No.
Ask yourselves, who benefits when things aren't transparent?
Right.
Who loses when you can't trust your institutions anymore? Those are questions that have, implications far beyond just South Africa.
Yeah. And, it strikes me that Ramaphosa's, that business background, the thing that everyone thought was such a strength.
Right.
It's being looked at with a lot more skepticism now.
Yeah.
Especially with all this stuff coming out. It raises a big question. Can a capitalist really fight for the needs of a nation that's struggling with, all this inequality, all this, this history of exploitation?
That's a question that's going to stick with me. And on that note, I think we've reached the surface of this deep dive.
I think so.
So thanks for joining us on this exploration of South African politics. Until next time, stay curious.